If I say Resident Evil 1, which one do you think of? Is it the original released in 1996, the director's cut from 97, the GameCube remake from 2002, or the yet-to-be-announced but heavily rumored Resident Evil 1 Remake? How about Final Fantasy VII? More on this remake later. Or everyone's favorite game to play in their dentist's waiting room, Super Monkey Ball. Sort of mirroring modern Hollywood, as new generations of customers grow up to start consuming entertainment products, so too come new remakes of past products. But not all game remakes are welcome with open arms. For every Demon's Souls remake or Mafia Definitive Edition, there's an RE3 scripted Nemesis encounter waiting in an alley to rip your heart out of your chest and show it to you. As the nostalgia drains from your lifeless body, you ask yourself, who thought this version would be better? A little dramatic, but you get the idea. So what makes a good video game remake? Let's get into it. For this video, we're not looking at reboots that reset an entire franchise, sorry Tomb Raider 2014, and we're not looking at remasters, which are usually the exact same game re-released to include some technical improvements like lighting or a higher polygon count to milk their fans for easy money. Sorry all 57 versions of The Last of Us, that's a joke, don't burn my house down. Today we are specifically looking at remakes, when an older game is rebuilt from scratch specifically to appeal to modern audiences. And no, not the political modern audiences. Instead, catering to today's expectations for gameplay mechanics, quest design, and yes, visual improvements that may not have been present back when the original came out. Now, I'm not the terminology wizard or the great big book of everything.
I understood that reference.
This is just how I view the differences between these types of games behind these lifeless eyes of mine. Let's start with the very first thing you probably notice with a good remake. I know I literally just said no remaster talk, but presentation is the category where there's usually some overlap between remasters and remakes. The presentation is more than just graphics good. It's the tone of the aesthetics, the sound and visual design. What does it make you feel when you step into RE1 Remake's Spencer Estate for the first time, seeing the soft candlelight lighting the dark, empty dining room, while the sound of thunder and the spooky soundtrack remind you that this is a horror game you're playing, and something is probably waiting for you around the corner? Well, if it's a remake that you're playing, then that presentation should toe the line between new yet still familiar. Staying true to the original's atmosphere and art style can be the perfect way to make two games with drastically different graphics still feel connected. Stray too far in art style and presentation, then the remake risks just alienating its fans by shying away from the original instead of embracing it. The Spencer Estate just wouldn't work in a remake if you walk in and there's neon lights everywhere and, I don't know, Nyan Cat playing or something. Look at the System Shock remake. These two games are 30 years apart, and it shows. But even at a passing glance, they're both still clearly System Shock 1, with the remake recreated so faithfully to the original that some argue it comes off as more of a remaster than a remake. Meanwhile, you've got games like Shadow of the Colossus remake, where a pretty good portion of the fan base felt left down. The brightened visuals and lush environments, while gorgeous, seem to betray that dreary tone of the original with its darker color palette and denser fog. But leaving this overlap between remaster and remake, a technically upgraded yet faithful presentation alone isn't enough to make a good remake. If audience impressions of the upcoming Silent Hill 2 remake are any indication, the next category can be just as important. What's popular or just expected from gameplay mechanics changes over time. In one decade, it's okay to not have sprint in your first-person shooters, and the next,
this game is too slow, where's the sprint?
More often than not, remakes do take this into account. After all, they're trying to appeal to gamers today to buy their product today. Now, I know it hasn't come out yet and is still subject to change before release, but let's look at what's been revealed of the Silent Hill 2 remake so far. While the original is most praised for its isolated yet threatening atmosphere, its storytelling of psychological horror, and its macabre enemy creature design, it's also known for its combat that even fans of the game will tell you is pretty clunky. But that's sort of been a staple in Silent Hill games in the past. Unpolished and often frustrating combat mechanics that add to to the tension.
Oh, what's the attack button again? Could you just hit him, please? I'm clicking all the buttons that it's supposed to be.
Up like in
Here we go! Here we go, we got it!
That's it.
It's not easy to take down these hellish beasts, so there's still room to be afraid of them. However, in the remake footage shown... Silent Hill fans have been pretty vocal that protagonist James Totally Not Leon Kennedy Sunderland looks like he's having way too easy of a time massacring everything in sight. Sure, the melee still looks like a puppet from the Duloc Visitor Center, but watching James mow his way through enemies looks more like Doom than it does Silent Hill 2. Is that too far? Okay, it looks like Resident Evil 4 then. Hello.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that feels fair. Now, the other side of this argument says that to get modern gamers interested in the game, you've got to appeal to modern combat mechanics. For example, Final Fantasy VII's remake swapped the turn-based combat of its original for real-time combat more like the later Final Fantasy games had been using, and depending on who you ask, people seem to like that. Resident Evil 2 and 3's remakes shifted from the fixed camera angles and tank controls of the originals.
I'm moving forward right now. I'm moving backwards. And this is more or less how a tank would actually move.
To the over-the-shoulder perspectives that, get this, let you move and aim at the same time. And people seem to like that. Did that scare you, Gizmo? He is terrified of this thing. Look at him. You want the gun? You want the gun? I've never even shown him this. That's insane. I don't use guns on my dogs. Anywho, you do lose that feeling of uneasiness when you can hear something awful around the corner, but the camera angle doesn't let you see it just yet. But the guys over at Capcom must have wagered that was less important than modernizing the perspective, which seems to have paid off. RE2 Remake did great.
I'm the best there is, plain and simple.
Despite a few changes being poorly received, like the A and B campaign system that was somehow worse than the originals, the game as a whole was so well received it's arguably led to the renaissance of horror game remakes we've been seeing since 2019. Or other series outright copying its gameplay, like Alan Wake 2 or the Alone in the Dark reboot. And directly led to the RE3 remake, which absolutely neutered Nemesis as a villain, demoting him from an unstoppable monster that's always stalking you to, what? A few scripted sequences and a bafflingly simple couple of boss fights? Big dog scary, apparently. So Capcom gave us a good example of updating mechanics, followed by a bad example, I guess. Meanwhile, a remake like Dead Space more or less kept its combat mechanics exactly the same as its original, seemingly recognizing there was no need to change it, as that style of third-person shooter gameplay was still just as popular in 2023 as it was in 2008. If it ain't broke yet, don't fix it yet. However, it did upgrade its zero-gravity mechanics to match the Iron Man-like flying around that was introduced back in Dead Space 2. Why? Because leapfrogging in straight lines is annoying, that's why. And giving the player more control in these segments led to the game having more zero-G areas for exploration, including a complete replacement for the much-hated asteroid gun segment. Not to mention, the remake connected all of the areas of the USG Ishimura into one coherent map. You can travel from place to place within it without using the tram system if you want to, which just ups the immersion in an already immersive, claustrophobic nightmare of a horror game. I mean that in a good way. So this is a great example of a gameplay mechanic addition that helps justify the existence of the remake in the first place. How a remake chooses to update or not update its gameplay mechanics is usually completely dependent on when the remake is released and what's popular at the time. Like, say VR becomes the new household standard for gaming, I won't be shocked to see a slew of remakes making use of VR controls as a way to update the game for these hypothetical modern audiences. Which honestly, I think that would suck. It'd feel like a bunch of remakes of the same game, just with different enemy models. That's just me. If the rumors about a Halo CE remake are true, I could see them changing the open level design to be more linear or the movement increased to appeal to general audiences.
Where's the sprint?
I know the Halo content well is dry, and some people are trying to pass that off as fact, but nothing's been officially announced yet at the time of recording. And even when it is announced, let's wait till we see the final product.
We will always have split screen in going forward.
Halo rant aside, let's look at the next criteria, which arguably ignites the most heated debates within a fandom when discussing a remake. That's right, Remakes, you've got the gargantuan task of delivering a story that is consistent with the original, but still has room for some new ideas. This is a delicate balance though. Too many new ideas and not enough consistency with the original will just piss off your fan base.
Bad news. What?
The Halo TV show. It's cancelled.
Oh no. Anyway, last week...
I know that's not a remake, it's an adaptation, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity. Take a look at the latest Modern Warfare series. I know they're not level for level remakes, but a lot of the original's story meat has been recycled for the new ones. Their new version of General Shepard's storyline is objectively inferior, along with their no Russian segment and their handling of the villain Makarov.
Who are you people?
Sure, the presentation and gameplay mechanics are better defined than the original games, but when it comes to the story, well, it looks like they just forgot to give a souring the taste of these campaigns in the mouths of a lot of the COD fanbase who play for the campaigns. How about when a remake goes woke? I think we can all agree that any change made to a remake was done because that's what the team behind it thought would make the game better, right? I mean, they're not going to do what they think will actively make the game worse. So really, when a remake adds
Socio-political messaging
that was not present anywhere in the original, maybe it hurts the game, maybe you don't even notice it, but very rarely would I think it makes the game better. Like, best case scenario, it's a neutral change. And if it's a neutral change, why deviate from the original at all? Right out of the gates, there's been pushback against Angela and Maria's designs in the Silent Hill 2 remake, categorizing it as that same body positivity uglification of fictional women thing that looks like it's been spreading across gaming lately. I don't care that Ada Wong, Claire Redfield, and Jill Valentine have less revealing outfits in the remakes. They're still attractive people. To me, it works because it fits with the more grounded tone this series of remakes has been going for. But the Silent Hill 2 remake, on the other hand,
I don't even know who you are.
You will.
I mean, they've made Angela look more like the 19-year-old character she is, which that makes sense to me. I mean, look at the original. She looks like she's 35.
Lost?
But it also looks like they downplayed her attractiveness too. How does changing Angela's character model in this way make the game better? Does it make the game a worse product?
No way, not this time. Not a chance.
No, but the intent behind its inclusion is enough to put people off, and I completely understand why. But plot-wise, and without spoiling, Maria's design has to be sexual in nature. This is not like Ada, Claire, Jill, or Angela.
My name is Maria. I don't look like a ghost, do I?
Maria has to be an exaggeration of sexualization in the context of Silent Hill 2's story and symbolism. If that comment makes somebody out there angry and think I'm a raging misogynist, go play the original Silent Hill 2 first, then come back and let us know if you still disagree, for some reason. And I guess we'll see what Bloober and their consultancy group have done with her when the game actually comes out.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
Anywho, these kind of unnecessary inserts of modern messaging into remakes just tends to show the players that whoever made it cared more about signaling their virtue or self-inserting themselves than they did about the inspiration behind the remake. I've got a whole video on how Resident Evil 5 is apparently too racist for a remake where I go more in depth on this stuff. Feel free to check that one out after this video. On the flip side of that balance, keep the story intact while also improving the presentation and gameplay, then you may have a game on your hands that replaces the original for some people.
What you say is heresy.
And that's heresy, I know, but that's what the Dead Space and RE4 remake did for me. Dead Space Remake added side missions and collectibles that expand on the lore of the first game and help it tie in with the sequels even better than the original did. While RE4 Remake expands on Louis Serra's backstory, the history of pretty much all the bosses, run from Amish Mr. X, and the sequence of events that led up to RE4 happening in the first place. Two games, two perfect examples of how to add to the lore without any distracting contradictions. And then entirely separate from this balance we've been talking about is the absolute wild card that is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. If you want to go in blind, stop watching the video now, but I'm pretty sure the only reason they put Remake in the title was for marketing purposes. Both games exist canonically, to the point where some characters even remember the events of the original. This remake, which is the first of a trilogy of games marketed as one big remake of Final Fantasy VII, is about as much of a remake as Avengers Endgame is to the first Avengers movie. That's just my 2 cents. Strongly suggest you be familiar with the original Final Fantasy VII before playing the remake if you haven't already. We've seen a lot of remakes, especially recently, with varying levels of success, juggling an updated but familiar presentation, improved gameplay mechanics that build on the original's foundation. I am a parrying god. And a story that both respects the original while adding to it. I might be in the minority here, but so long as remakes can handle these 3 categories, I won't mind seeing more of them. Let me know in the comments if you feel the same way, or if there's a category that you think I missed that also makes for a good remake. Thank you, channel members, for voting on the topic of today's video. I know I mentioned a lot of horror games, but they get a lot of remakes. If you'd like to hang with me while I play some, check out the second channel. As always, thanks for watching. Carry on, you kings.